I visited the Seiko Museum on my trip to Japan and thought I'd share my experience with you all. Now, I went in with my partner and some friends as they were also curious about what was inside, so I'll touch on what they thought about their museum as well. When I went inside, I noticed there weren't that many people. At first, I thought it might have been due to the day I visited or maybe the time that I went in, but I think it was mainly due to the reservation system. Before coming to the museum, it was recommended to make a reservation, so I did. I believe they do this to limit the amount of people walking around the museum at certain time frames, as the floors aren't the most spacious, but it also allows you to have a more intimate viewing, which I really came to appreciate. Now, they did provide me with an option for a guide, however, I declined and opted to explore for myself. One thing that became apparent rather quickly was how different my experience was to those of my partner and friends. Sure, we all liked watches and were fans of Seiko, but the love for horology wasn't shared among us. It was just me. Now, do you have to like horology to enjoy the museum? Not at all. You don't even have to be a big Seiko fan to enjoy it, but your experience will be a lot different if you do. For them, seeing older and different Seiko models was cool, but the history and stories behind those pieces didn't really resonate with them, which is completely fine. Each floor was rather small, and if you just walk around and look at everything briefly, you could be done with the museum in about 20 or so minutes, which is probably how much time they would have spent if it weren't for me. Watches are all about little details and knowing what to look for, and for me, it was an amazing journey that could last multiple hours. I started on the bottom floor and worked my way up, which is the intended path, and I also recommend doing the same as it follows a logical progression. The whole museum was essentially a physical rendition of Seiko's timeline, filled with interesting timepieces, artifacts, and even manuscripts. As watch enthusiasts, we always talk about and value heritage, and for some, it might be hard to envision what this heritage actually is, but the Seiko Museum does a great job at showing you its heritage. It takes you through the story of Seiko's evolution from its humble beginnings in 1881 to becoming one of the world's most renowned watchmakers, showcasing their technological advancements and groundbreaking innovations like the world's first quartz watch and, of course, the spring drive mechanism which fuels Grand Seiko. There's so much to look at in the museum, and breaking it up into themed floors really helps you understand the significance and history behind the immense diversity of timepieces. If you're looking for an interactive experience, then the museum isn't it. There are a few gimmicky things like stationary loops and dynamic displays, but nothing you can really physically interact with, which I completely understand, as many of the objects are rare, fragile, and priceless. There are some photo opportunities throughout the floors, which was nice, and some seats for those who get tired of following their watch-obsessed friend around. While the museum obviously revolves around Seiko, it also felt like an honoring of watchmaking as a whole. It was highlighting more so the process instead of the product, paying tribute to the work that was put into creating timepieces that were worn in the past and those worn in the present. It really put into perspective the challenges and difficulties in watchmaking, the impacts certain developments had on the brand and the wider watch world, but also how it has evolved. It was no longer just about making a robust watch, accuracy, or precision. As I kept moving up the floors, one notion was making its way to the forefront: craftsmanship. Many know Seiko as the reliable, affordable, and often gateway watch. Even if you're not into watches, you've probably seen a Seiko product somewhere, but it's not often associated with craftsmanship. Going through the museum, I built more of an appreciation not just for Seiko, but for every watch, for even the most simplest timepiece has hours poured into it. It has a touch of artistry in its design, and it was crafted for a purpose. Ultimately, under the product we see, a lot of work went into it, and this was further honed in on when I eventually reached the Grand Seiko Museum. Immediately, this floor had a different feeling to it. The layout was different from the rest, incorporating wood in conjunction with warm lights to simulate a calming and serene atmosphere. You could tell this floor felt very polished compared to the rest. The floor itself had its own intended progression, numbered from beginning to end to guide you through the growth of Grand Seiko with brief explanations for each concept. It was evident that this floor was all about the art of watchmaking and showcasing the greatness behind Grand Seiko. A bounty of things were on display: rare pieces, cases from vintage to modern, and families of movements down to the most recent renditions. Seiko was not holding back when it came to illustrating what Grand Seiko was about, but it made me realize something. There were a lot more modern pieces here, pieces I've seen online and in boutiques. There honestly wasn't anything that was truly surprising. Sure, there were a few things which really grabbed my attention, but they weren't even watches. Everything in here was rather new and young. Although the Grand Seiko Museum was definitely grand, it was just one floor. Grand Seiko was still in its youth compared to Seiko, and the entire museum was a clear example of that. 7 floors were dedicated to Seiko, brimming with rich history, trials and triumph, advancements that would pave the way for the future, ideals which set the very foundation for Grand Seiko to stand on. There were hints of Grand Seiko throughout the 7 floors to the top, from vintage King Seiko models and early renditions of Grand Seiko timepieces. So, was it necessary to have a separate floor dedicated to Grand Seiko? No, but was it the correct move? Yes. Having that separation allows you to be enveloped in the experience. It prevented one from overshadowing the other and makes a clear distinction between Seiko and Grand Seiko, yet still maintains a crucial bond by being in the same building. Overall, the Seiko portion of the museum was the most enjoyable for me, and as cliche as it sounds, being in Japan to experience the Seiko Museum just made everything better. If you're heading to Japan and you're interested in watches, I'd say give it a shot. You can go at your own pace or get a guide, and it's free, so even if you don't end up liking it, you can leave at any time without feeling guilty. If you've been to the Seiko Museum, share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear what everyone thought about the museum, and if you have any questions, feel free to pop them down and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you for checking out the video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and consider subscribing for more watch content. I'll see you in the next one.